A small-town diner, the kind where everyone knew each other, buzzed with the usual lunchtime crowd. But today, something felt off. In the corner, an elderly man with a worn leather jacket and a long gray beard sat alone, quietly eating his meal. Three teenagers hovered nearby, smirking. Then, without warning, one of them snatched his drink and laughed. The old man sighed, clearly used to this treatment. The waitress watching from across the room clenched her fists. She had seen enough. The waitress, Anna, had worked at this diner for over a year. She knew the regulars, their orders, and their stories. The elderly man, known as Frank, was one of them. He came in every week, always polite, always tipping well despite his worn-out clothes. But today, those teenagers had decided to make him their target. Anna saw Frank lower his gaze as the teens chuckled. One of them, a lanky boy with a baseball cap turned backward, leaned in. "What's wrong, old man?" "Cat got your tongue." Another boy snatched a fry from Frank's plate and popped it into his mouth. The third, a girl with bright blue hair, pulled out her phone and started recording. "Say something for the camera, Grandpa," she mocked. Anna's blood boiled. The other customers noticed what was happening, but no one moved. No one wanted to get involved. Frank, on the other hand, stayed silent, his hands resting on the table, his jaw clenched. He had probably been through worse in his lifetime. Anna took a deep breath and marched over. "Hey!" Her voice was sharp, commanding. The teens froze. "Leave him alone! Now!" The boy in the cap scoffed. "Relax, lady. We're just having fun." Anna didn't budge. "This is not fun. You're harassing a customer, and if you don't leave right now, I'll make sure you do." The girl with the phone laughed. "Oh, what are you going to do? Call the cops?" Anna leaned in slightly. "Or I could call my manager and have you banned from here forever. Or I could call your parents. I'm sure they'd love to see this video you're filming." The smirk on the girl's face faded. She lowered her phone slightly. The boy in the cap rolled his eyes but stepped back. "Whatever. This place sucks anyway." As they turned to leave, the boy grabbed Frank's drink and threw it onto his lap. The cold liquid soaked into his worn jeans. The teens burst into laughter before finally walking out the door. Frank sighed and reached for the napkins. Anna quickly grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter and handed it to him. "I'm so sorry about that," she said. Frank gave her a tired smile. "It's not your fault, kid. Some people just don't have respect." Anna clenched her jaw. "They shouldn't have treated you like that. Are you okay?" Frank nodded. "I've been through worse." He patted her arm gently. "You got guts standing up for an old biker like me. Not many people would do that." Before Anna could respond, a voice called from the back. "Anna, in my office, now." Her stomach dropped. The manager, Mr. Carter, stood in the doorway, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. She gave Frank an apologetic look before following her manager to the back. Inside the office, Carter shut the door and turned to her. "What were you thinking?" Anna frowned. "I was protecting a customer." Carter shook his head. "You were threatening customers. Those kids have parents who come here every week. We can't afford to lose business over something like this." Her chest tightened. "So you're saying I should have just let them bully him?" Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm saying you should have let me handle it." Anna's fist clenched. "But you didn't handle it. You just stood there." His face hardened. "That's enough. Hand over your apron. You're done here." Her breath caught. "Wait, you're firing me?" Carter nodded. "Effective immediately." Anna's heart pounded as she stared at him in disbelief. She had worked hard at this job. She had shown up on time, covered shifts, treated customers well, and now for doing the right thing, she was being thrown out. She felt the sting of humiliation as she removed her apron and placed it on his desk. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her hands shaking as she stepped back into the diner. Frank was still there, watching her with concerned eyes. "What happened?" he asked. Anna forced a small smile, even as her eyes burned. "I just got fired." Frank's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Anna gave him a reassuring nod. "It's okay. I'll figure something out." She walked out of the diner, the cold air hitting her face as the door shut behind her. What she didn't know was that in less than 2 hours, her life was about to change forever. Anna sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel. Her heart was still racing. Fired, just like that, for doing the right thing. The unfairness of it burned inside her. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to calm down. She needed to figure out what to do next. Bills were due, rent was coming up. She couldn't afford to be jobless. Her phone buzzed. A message from her best friend Mia. "Hey, want to hang out later?" Anna stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Got fired, not really in the mood. Almost immediately, Mia responded. "What? Are you serious? I'm coming over." Anna sighed. She appreciated Mia's support, but right now she just wanted to be alone. Before she could put her phone down, there was a knock on her window. She jumped, then turned and saw Frank standing outside her car. His weathered face looked more serious than before. She rolled down the window. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Anna forced a small smile. "Not really." Frank nodded like he understood. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble. I appreciate what you did in there. Most people would have looked the other way." Anna shrugged. "It was just the right thing to do." Frank studied her for a moment. Then, without saying anything, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. He handed it to her. "If you ever need anything, call this number." Anna looked down at the card. It was plain, just a phone number written in bold black ink. No name, no business. Just a number. She frowned. "What is this?" Frank smiled slightly. "A lifeline." Before she could ask more, he patted the car door and walked off, his heavy boots echoing against the pavement. Anna watched him go, then glanced at the card again. She shook her head and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Right now, she needed to focus on finding another job. She drove home, her mind racing. How was she supposed to explain this to her landlord, or her mom, who already worried about her? Maybe she could pick up some shifts at the grocery store. Maybe her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of motorcycles. Loud, multiple engines roaring in the distance. She glanced in her rearview mirror. Her stomach dropped. A swarm of motorcycles, at least 50, maybe more, was riding down the main road. Their headlights pierced through the evening light, their engines rumbling like thunder, and they were headed straight for the diner. Anna sat frozen, watching the motorcycles swarm past her. The sheer number of them was overwhelming, a sea of black leather and roaring engines. They weren't just passing through, they were stopping, right in front of the diner. Her breath hitched. Was this some kind of coincidence? Or did this have something to do with Frank? Curiosity warred with apprehension, but something deep in her gut told her to stay. She turned her car into the parking lot, keeping a safe distance. The diner's windows rattled from the vibrations of the engines as the riders dismounted. Some wore helmets, others had their faces exposed, grizzled, hardened, serious expressions. Then, one by one, they stepped aside, clearing a path. Frank emerged from the center of the pack. Mr. Carter peeked through the blinds, his face pale. The rowdy teens from earlier, still loitering nearby, had lost every trace of arrogance. They were frozen, wide-eyed, as if they suddenly realized they had poked a sleeping bear. Frank didn't look at them. He didn't need to. He looked at Anna. She swallowed hard as he approached her car, his steps slow, deliberate. When he reached the driver's side, he knocked on the window. She rolled it down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Come with me," he said. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a request. It was an invitation. Anna hesitated only a second before stepping out. The bikers parted as Frank led her toward the diner. Mr. Carter was still at the window, looking like he wanted to bolt. Frank pushed the door open and walked in. The diner, once buzzing with chatter, was now dead silent. Every pair of eyes was on them. Frank stopped in the middle of the room, Anna beside him. He turned to Mr. Carter, his voice calm but carrying weight. "This young woman stood up for me today," he said. "She showed courage. She did what was right." His eyes darkened. "And you punished her for it." Mr. Carter licked his lips nervously. Frank held up a hand. "Save it." He turned to Anna. "Do you want your job back?" Anna looked at him, then at Mr. Carter, then at the sea of bikers waiting for her answer. She took a deep breath. "No," she said firmly. A slow smile spread across Frank's face. "Good answer." He turned back to Mr. Carter. You don't deserve someone like her working for you. Mr. Carter said nothing. He simply nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out another card. This one different from the plain one he had given her before. He handed it to Anna. If you ever want a fresh start, call this number, he said. Anna looked down. This time the card had a name, a business, a future. She met Frank's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. And then, just like that, he turned and walked out, his brothers following. The roar of motorcycles filled the air once more as they rode away, leaving behind nothing but the weight of their presence and the memory of what had just happened. Anna watched them disappear into the night, then looked down at the card in her hand. She wasn't just walking away from a job. She was stepping towards something new, something bigger, and she was ready. Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling tales and updates.